Welcome to Meet the Gatekeepers. This is a webinar produced by the Columbia Fiction Foundry. My name is Ken Schept, and I'm the president of Columbia Fiction Foundry. I'll be moderating this evening's program, which is really designed to help us learn about agents and learn how to secure representation. And on that score, we are extremely fortunate tonight because we have with us 5 of the leading industry agents. They each own their own agency, and each is also a member of a consortium called Agents Roundtable. Before I introduce them, I'd like to take a moment to just talk about Columbia Fiction Foundry. We're a group of writers that basically just help each other improve our craft by meeting monthly in workshops and also holding seminars or programs sort of like this. What we have in common is that all of us, one way or another, have an affiliation with Columbia University, and we warmly invite you to join us. All the details are on our website, which I think should be on the screen. If not, it's easy enough to Google Columbia Fiction Foundry. We have a really large audience tonight, and thank you all for finding the time to join us. We have people from all different schools of Columbia University, alumni and people who are still in various colleges, especially from the School of the Arts and the writing program, and I think we have some current MFA students with us. I particularly would like to thank the School of the Arts and the writing program for helping us get the word out tonight for this webinar. And I should say that we have a lot to cover in 90 minutes. So what I've done is I've divided the questions into 4 baskets. And the first basket is Meet the Gatekeepers. Let's try to understand this business from the other point of view, from what happens in the mind and the day of an agent. And the second basket is opening up that gate. What is it that we have to do to persuade an agent that our work deserves representation? The third basket is about the industry today. What are some of the trends? And the last basket is your questions that were either submitted before the seminar or questions that you put into the chat. And I really encourage you to put your questions into the chat. The program is being recorded. It'll be available on the Columbia Fiction Foundry site next week. To get started, let's meet our panel. And to introduce our panel, I'd like to introduce to all of us the person who has helped us put together this partnership and coordinate this webinar, Meredith Bernstein from Meredith Bernstein Literary Agency. So Meredith, perhaps you can introduce yourself and your colleagues on the panel. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Meredith Bernstein, and welcome to the webinar tonight. And I want to say that we are here to give you as much information as we possibly can. So don't hold back with your questions. And I think you'll find with this particular group of women that we're all very frank and we're all very seasoned. So we know what we're talking about. We've been doing it for a long time, and we really are committed to doing the best job we can. Myself, I've had my own agency for quite a long time, and I've sold, my list is predominantly half fiction and half nonfiction. I do every kind of nonfiction across the board, except military history, but I just came back from a conference and I might be doing military. So we'll see if I get that client. And in the field of fiction, everything from, the most commercial kind of fiction to literary fiction. I don't do poetry. I don't think any of us do. I have done YA. I'm not doing it anymore, but that's the essence of my list. And let me turn this now to Sorche Fairbank, who's next on the screen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sorche Fairbank. My agency is Fairbank Literary. I, too, have been doing this longer than, well, it used to be like a point of pride, right? Like, I've been doing this for blah, blah, blah years. And now when I say how many, I feel old. But this going into my 23rd year, best job in the world. My list is, it changes about every 5 years, the mix, but on the adult side, it's about 60-40 nonfiction to fiction. And then I'm also doing children's books as well. But the best way to talk about my list is to quote my husband, who told somebody once that I take on highbrow, lowbrow, and not much in between. I kind of like that. So for fiction, since a lot of you are probably fiction writers, more literary, international women's voices, a little bit book club fiction, but I don't get into genre fiction. I don't speculative thrillers, all that. And on the nonfiction side, I'm much more narrative, almost never prescriptive. And then if something is a really weird idea, I'm probably your agent. But you probably don't have too many of those. Maybe you do. I don't know. All right. Do I turn it over to the next one, Meredith?
Yeah.
Because I see Paige next.
Thanks. Thank you, Sorche. Hi, everyone. I'm Paige Wheeler. I'm president of Creative Media Agency. And like my colleagues, I've been doing this for a long time. I've been in business for over 20 years. I represent primarily fiction. So I'm one of the ones that's 90% fiction. And I do everything from commercial fiction. I do genre fiction. I do the nonfiction, I do some upmarket fiction. The nonfiction I do is narrative, self-help. I do a little bit of middle grade. I also have associates. I have 6 associates in my agency, so we handle everything from picture books all the way up. So we're a full service agency, boutique agency, and we're hungry to take on some authors who want to grow their career. That's it for me. I'm going to throw it over to Jennifer Weis.
Hi, I'm Jennifer, and I became an agent first about 4 years ago. I was an emigre from Center of Publishing at St. Martin's Press as executive editor, so I was on what they would call the buy side, and now I feel I'm on the sell side and actually kind of loving that new challenge. And my list has been in the last couple of years has been comprised largely of nonfiction, but I'm always on the lookout for fiction. I'm interested in book club fiction, women's fiction, crossover literary commercial fiction, and every type of suspense novel you could imagine, particularly domestic suspense, I would say. And I look for voice, plot, and what's at stake. And I think if I could sum it up and say, I like a lot of that in the first chapter. That's what turns me on. And I want to lose myself. And it's that thrill of discovery, right? That we're all really in this business for, and we're ready to discover you.
Thank you.
Irene, why don't you speak?
Hi, everyone. I'm Irene Goodman. I've had my own agency now for a very long time. And we think of ourselves as career builders. We're not just here to sell your one project. We want it to be very long-term, which is good for me and it's good for you. I do mostly, I was going to say I used to do a lot of entirely fiction, and then I started doing a lot of nonfiction. At this point, it's probably 50-50. So in fiction, I'm looking for very strong upmarket women's fiction, not genre fiction, but just strong commercial / literary fiction. But I would do a mystery series if I found one that I really loved. And even though it's become almost impossible to sell, I do historical fiction because I love it. It's for me. I love it. In nonfiction, it's mostly prescriptive as opposed to narrative. Anything to do with business, health, anything French. I'm a total Francophile, so anything that has to, I've sold a number of French girl books. Judaica, in really any area, but the books that I've sold have been mostly about ancient language, ancient Bible interpretations, things like that. And pop culture, which kind of adds a nice little dollop of fun to everything else that I do. I did one memoir. It was the only one I've ever done. And it came from a query and it made the New York Times list, but that's very unusual. That does not always happen, but it's one of the, to me, if you were to ask me, what is the most important book you ever sold, it would be that one. It's called Survivor's Club, and it's a family memoir about a 4-year-old boy who survived the Auschwitz death camp.
Okay. Well, thank you. it almost feels as if we didn't ask one question. There's enough out there that people have a pretty good sense of who you are and where they want to send their manuscripts. That was really wonderful. And there's such a variety of the kinds of work that you all represent. But we will go to the questions. And as Meredith said, there's
Let
a
me-
few questions and we'll get Frank answers. Meredith.
Can I just tell the audience about art?
Oh,
Just
sorry, Meredith, of course.
Okay, I just wanted you to know that the reason we're all together is we belong to an organization, and you can Google the website. It's called the Agents Roundtable. It's a consortium of independent literary agents, each the head of her own firm. Founded in 2000, the group meets regularly and consults collegially about constantly changing facets of the book publishing industry and media of all types, from film to digital to social platforms. We meet once a month. While serving our clients with the individual attention of the small personal agency, art member agents are able to offer the resources and outreach of the larger agencies. This allows us to create a best of both worlds situation for our clients. For example, we actually met today. Somebody will bring up a problem, and then you get, if there are 12 people on the call, you get sort of 12 different ideas about how to handle it, or suggestions if you're going out with a book, if you haven't figured out, if you feel you haven't covered a certain base on your list, or you could use more suggestions for houses to go to, we supply that. And we really are, it's really wonderful. I mean, it's like a group of sisters who really want to help each other, and we really love it. So that's who we are as a group. And our website has the individual profiles of the rest of us who are not on this call tonight.
Okay, thank you, Meredith. That's great to hear about that kind of collaboration, which is sort of unusual these days. So let's get to the questions. And what we're going to do is I'll read a question, and then I will choose one agent to answer the question. Anybody else can jump in, but we have so many questions. We won't have an opportunity for every agent to respond to each question. It just won't work. So here's the first group of questions, and no surprise, it's sort of about querying, which is sort of when you boil it down, that's what it's about. How do we impress you? So how many unsolicited queries do you receive, let's say in an average week? Like, what are we up against? When do you read your queries? And how many pages do you request? And how much time do you spend looking at those pages? And how deep do you have to get into something before you just say, next?
That might be good for all of us to answer, because
I think so, yeah.
Because it's going to be different.
for
everyone.
All right. So Paige, why don't you start?
Great, thank you. Well, this is actually a fabulous question because I just switched over to Query Manager, which is a query tool.
Yep.
So I had been closed for queries for the past 6 months. And in the first week, I got over 400 queries in
Wow.
1 week,
Wow.
which happens when you open. So how much time do I spend to go through those 400 queries? As you can imagine, during the day, all of us are working on behalf of our clients for the most part. We are handling contracts, sending pitches out, talking about foreign rights, maybe doing the meeting that we did today. So that reading that we do of query letters often happens after hours or even before hours if anyone's an early bird. So I tend to try and chunk part of my day away to read those queries. How much time do I spend? Not very long. I'm getting used to the new Query Manager format. But the way I've set it up, I do get a synopsis. I do read that first page. I normally request the first 5 pages and a synopsis. And I go through, and sometimes by that first page, you sort of know, right? And we all use little indicators. And this actually came up today, I think, during our call. Meredith brought it up of, it's really helpful, and I require this in the Query Manager of letting me know how long that material is, right? We had that discussion today. So I know if something is over industry, it's 150,000 words, that's probably going to be an automatic no. It's just too long. So we use parameters. We do a quick look. If I like it, what I'll do is either ask for the first 50 pages or the complete manuscript, depending on what it is. My turnaround time, we'll see. I've been closed for 6 months. I'm hoping to get a little bit faster than I have been, but I do have a full list of clients to manage as well. So that's how I handle it. I'm trying to be fast so I don't weigh down the conversation because I want to
Okay. Well,
pitch
that's
it to
good.
someone else.
Well, who else would like to pick that up? I mean, 400
Well.
queries is
That's
astounding.
unusual because I just
Oh,
opened it.
Irene, did you want to?
Yes, I'm very lucky that I'm married to somebody who is incredibly good at reading queries. And uh, it's not that I never look at them, but I think what you all need to understand, it is not the first priority in any agency.
Mm,
It's something that we hope will get done, but often it just doesn't. And if they pile up enough, then a lot of them never get looked at. I'm sorry, but that is the harsh reality.
mhm,
It's not the way we want it, but there are just so many. I personally get about 10 a day, maybe 12. That's 7 days a week. So that's, nobody can read 70 queries a week. We're much too busy
mhm,
doing other things.
mhm,
And I don't actually think that the best way to find an agent is through the traditional query process, although I wouldn't tell you not to do it.
mhm.
But if you look at my website, I did a blog post on how, if I were an author looking for an agent, how I would do it. And it has to do mostly with referrals and how to put yourself in a place where you could be referred to an agent that you might like.
I have a completely different
Okay.
approach.
Me
Okay.
too.
I get,
All right.
I get, probably get about 30 queries a day. I personally read every single one the day it comes in. But my thing, and I believe it says it on my website, if it's not for me, I don't respond at all. And if I'm interested, I ask for hard copy to be sent to my office because I'm not printing out every single project that comes my way. I ask for a hard copy, 75 pages of hard copy, and then they send it to me, and then I try to and then I read as I can. But I absolutely, I mean, even though I'm doing a lot of other things, I do go through all my queries because I want to move fast if I like something, and that's just my approach, but that's what I do.
Well, you said during today's call, you're always looking for that needle in the haystack, and so are we all, but that's what it is. It's a needle in the
I
haystack.
think we have a lot of needles in the audience, I think.
But I
We do, we do.
I get about 100 to 150 a week also. I think that seems a standard kind of number. I use Query Manager, but I also use my email.
Yeah.
And I get them on both ways. And I really find, I have to say, I am drawn in by titles. Sometimes, I start going chronologically, but if there's a great title, especially in my commercial realm, I will tend to go straight to that. And what I ask for is a query letter and 3 chapters right off the bat. So if I am intrigued by the title, by the query, I will go right to the first chapter. And usually I know from the first chapter, basically, not the 3, but I want at least 3 to see a little bit of development, to see just kind of where it's going. And if it's not, stopping cold or stopping me cold, and then I will request the full manuscript. I also do not respond if it's something that I'm not interested. We just don't have the wherewithal to do that, I think. And often when you do respond and you say something, then you're asked for, well, why, right? And that is another
Right.
answer. So that makes it a little tricky.
Yeah.
And one more thing. The minute I see 169,000 words, immediate delete. It's like, I've been doing this so long, I feel like I can smell my query.
Or 22,000. You might get a query that says, I'm writing a novel and it's 25. I got a few of those, 25 to 30,000, which is not a book either.
And it's a thriller that in Czechoslovakia.
Why don't you jump in? With
Yeah. I'll be the last one to round it up, and so overlap with kind of everyone. But like the first rule of it is check an agent's website because we're all a little bit different. But I think more in terms of how many I get a year, because I always do that yearly tally, but it would be about 200 a week because I'm pretty consistently 10,000 a year, give or take a few hundred. So I do read them all, but read is a loose term here. We're great skimmers. I mean, you will never meet as good of a skimmer as an agent, right? So we look for things either to say a quick no, or this looks interesting, let me slow down and keep reading. So when I read them, a lot of times it's Sunday nights. So I'm typically reading a good 200 at a time. And the first thing I'll do is Ken's making a face, but this is what we're trained to do, right?
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
So the first thing I'll do, I mean, I would say 20-25% of queries probably a lot of us get are right off the bat not a fit. They're the wrong genre. So I do a keyword search. If it's a poetry collection, I don't rep it. I get a lot of those queries, or sci-fi or something. Those are an automatic no. So I can whittle it down quickly. But I would say one of the lessons to a lot of you needles out there really is you've got to figure out how to stand out at least in a pile of 50 queries. So it could be just something special. It could be voice, could be character, could be plot, could be thesis, something that isn't going to look like what we've just seen a bunch of times before, because we see things that are so similar.
Okay.
But anyway, back to just to wrap up how I do it. I like to have pages pasted in or attached. I will always look very quickly at first pages too. And then if I like it, it's usually 100-page request. And if at 100 pages, my benchmark is, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't ask for the whole thing. Like I've got to really want it, not just, yeah, this was pretty good. Then I ask for the rest. But I'm slow too. So I miss out on some good ones because I'm slow.
Okay. Well,
I asked for 10 pages.
It sounds like we struck a rich, discouraging vein here. So I would like to, follow up a little bit. Two things. One, so it sounds, what I'm hearing is obviously you're overloaded with work, very hard to find time to focus. Does that mean basically most of the time we, the writers, are not going to hear back? We're either going to get nothing, no response, or a yes. There really is no middle ground, which is, well, I sort of liked it, but I didn't. Could you do this? I mean, we're beyond that. That's the first point. The second question is, to what Irene said, if really the level of querying is so burdensome in a sense on both sides, Irene started to talk about other ways to make this connection. So where else do you look for or find the people who you would like to represent?
For me, most of the fiction that I've taken on came through a referral. That's why I cultivate referrals. Nonfiction, I usually put it together myself, but not always. So if I'm in a very enterprising mood, I'll just pick up the phone and, like, I did a book about treatments for depression, and I just called up Harvard and I said, psych department, please. And I ended up getting the head of the bipolar clinic to write a book about new treatments for depression.
Let me just jump in there, Irene. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude, but I need to move this. And actually, everybody who's listening is interested in fiction, so I need to focus it on fiction.
Oh, okay.
So in this case, are you looking at literary journals? Are there other places where writers should do something to get your attention? Or are there other places that you look for writers other than what's in your inbox?
Let me jump into that one, if you
Paige.
don't mind. Yeah, so I mean, besides, as Irene said, referrals from our own clients and attending writers' conferences, some people do journals, but right now the trend seems to be actually the self-published pile. A lot of people are looking, editors as well, at self-published authors who've popped, that maybe we're hearing about on TikTok. We talked about TikTokable books during our meeting today. There's some sort of social media buzz that starts to bubble up. And so we have to keep our ear to the ground for that. When I do meetings with editors, I also like to hear what they're, what they're reading, and then find out if I can find people writing in that area as well. So as much as we get material coming in, as Irene mentioned, we are also reaching out and trying to do a little outreach as well.
And when you speak of social media, are you looking at Instagram, Substack? I mean, is it for a fiction writer? Does it make sense to build a social
For
media?
nonfiction, I find that more helpful, to be completely honest, for me.
For nonfiction, yeah.
Nonfiction. For fiction, I mean, it's all in the writing, right? A great high
Substack can work, yeah. Substack for fiction.
Yeah,
for fiction, yeah.
My piece of advice for authors too, though, is one, don't dismiss the query. We love finding that one that jumps out at us. I mean, so many clients I've discovered through the query pile I knew at the query level there was something there. Like it's almost a physical reaction you get. But my bigger advice is if you just think of everything you want for your book and you start doing that to other books, for other books, you never know where that pathway to an agent publication will lead. So first of all, if you want your book to be in a bookstore, for fuck's sake, don't buy from Amazon, buy from indie bookstores. You're going to get to know that bookstore. For all you know, that bookstore owner knows an agent who like finds you that way. You want people to come to your book talks. Well, get yourself to some other author talks, learn how they're done. You never know who's sitting next to you. So it's just things like that, like just everything you can think of that you want for your book, start doing for other books, and you're going to make connections you might not even plan, and that might be how a referral comes in.
I'd like to,
So it could be all different ways.
Meredith?
Yes, Meredith.
I'd like to add
Yeah,
something to that.
I want to add to what Paige said before that.
Wait, Meredith is speaking. Meredith.
Who, I'm sorry.
Meredith was just.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
When I go to writers' conferences, I always say to all writers, but go to the bookstore and look at the books that you like the most. Look at the acknowledgement page. Many times on the acknowledgement page, you'll see the agent's name. When somebody writes to me and says, I saw that you represented such and such book, it immediately grabs my attention. So that is a real tip for you to use in terms of, how your book is like this book that I've already represented. It really will resonate with any agent. So I promised you that. It's just something to tuck under your belt, you take with you to help, figure out who you might want to be approaching.
Okay, anybody else on that? Irene, were you going to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that to what Paige said about conferences. If I got half of my authors from referrals, I got the other half from attending conferences, but not from doing planned appointments. I don't like those very much. I find them to be very awkward and stilted, and the author is so nervous. It just seems very unnatural to me. But if you just kind of schmooze around the bar and the lobby where people congregate and get into conversations and just try to act like yourself and be friendly and helpful, is the seat taken, that kind of thing. I've gotten lots of authors that way.
Okay. I guess we'll be going to conferences. I wanted to follow up on this in a way on something that came up earlier when Meredith was talking about the collaborative nature of the group. So how far does that extend? So for example, if you receive a query or even a manuscript somehow that you like, but it's not quite a fit for you, within the consortium, do you sort of exchange and say, I think this is better, more in your wheelhouse?
All the time.
Okay, so that's a good thing. And for people who, I'm sure there are a lot of people, almost every person in the audience is now thinking, well, who am I going to query? And I'm sure a question is, it's okay to query more than one member of the consortium
Absolutely.
at a time.
Absolutely.
But they're
Absolutely.
independent.
I could speak to that. I really think that what I learned a lot about being as an editor and whatever, I really think that this is a taste business, meaning that two people, even in our group, would look like we actually do the same thing. And in fact, when you start to read the books by each of us, we would be incredibly different. And so it really is finding somebody who is a taste match for you. Who reads in your category, who likes the kinds of things you do. There's an overlap there and there's a click. And that's what, so that's just two words for me, and many different stripes for many people.
And true story, last year, Jennifer and I got a query from this woman and we were both incredibly interested in her, and she interviewed both of us. And and I could tell by the interview, I felt like it just didn't go that well. I don't know that I knew that I was up against Jennifer, but I somehow or other, the next day when she called me, I said, so she told me she wasn't going to go with me. I said, who'd you go with? She said, Jennifer Weis. I said, well, she's a great editor. And it so happens that Jennifer and I have a history, because when she was an editor and I was an agent, I sold my YA best-selling series to Jennifer. So, I think it was.
By the way, it was the first YA book that St. Martin's published and the Macmillan Group published, except for Macmillan Children's at that point, but it was St. Martin's really. And it was the first YA book that I had ever read. But why did it stand out? It had a fabulous character and a fabulous plot, great concept, conflict,
By the
and
way, wait a minute, let me tell you something. The idea was mine. I was at a conference, the author was a romance writer. We went to a conference and we met with her then editor. And I said, I have this idea. I want to do a book about a vampire finishing school. And the editor says, Meredith, Vampire Finishing School, that's a YA. And the author says to me, I'm a high school teacher. I could write YA. And then she didn't offer enough money. And I went to Jennifer and I pitched the idea. It's called The House of Night by PC and Kristen Cast. And I went to Jennifer, she bought it. It became major. These women became multimillionaires from that
and it
series.
went on for 10
Okay.
years as a series. Yeah.
Okay, well, good. Well, now we're on a hopeful note. What I would like to
We tried.
yeah, I'm going to skip around a little bit because I really want to get deeper into the idea of querying, because regardless of how difficult it is, that is the way the world works. That's why Query Tracker has this query manager, so it's all sort of codified now. You know exactly what you need to do, and you know exactly what you're getting. So that being the case, you know, what grabs your attention in a query? What prompts you to read the pages that may be pasted under the query, or to ask for more pages? That would be one. What in a query letter makes you immediately lose interest since you have 400 more letters to go to? And what makes you stop? Even though you have another 400 letters, there's something in here that may not be a waste of my time. So who wants to jump in on that? Anyone?
I would speak. I will talk to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I already said that, you know, from the listings of all the titles on Query Manager, I am drawn in by a title. But
Right.
when I actually read a letter, it's hard to express how a letter can bring everything together. I look for author's credentials a number of times.
Okay.
First, that's something if you've attended a writer's conference, a writer's program, an MFA program, a conference, a summer thing, or you've been abroad, something that's really interesting in the writing field. I am drawn to that to kind of hear what, where you're coming out of. Obviously, I'm looking at the comps that you choose to, but I think what's happened recently from my perspective, I don't know about you others, but all the other agents on here, but people are using comps more effectively, I find. So it becomes harder to use that as a distinguishing factor. Although I'm looking for genre. I'm looking for how I'm going to, if I were interested in this material, how am I going to position it? What is it different from, and what is it really different from in the author's mind from how it is really similar or a next step or not, and that letter that brings everything together with voice in the letter, so that I can say, I am really curious here. I want to hear who this person is behind, what they're doing. That's what a query letter, in my mind, has to do. It has to turn you on and has to provoke you to the next step.
Okay. Anybody else want to respond to that?
Yeah, I've got 4
Sorka?
tips that I like to give.
All right, Sorka and then Paige. Yeah.
The first tip is I like it, and my fellow agents might not, but I like it when there's what I call the big about sentence first. So just a simple sentence, what it's about, before you start fire hosing us with details, plot names and character names and all that. A quick example, like if you were to do a pitch on the Titanic, it's a love story set on a sinking ship. Like it could be that simple, right? Because it gives an umbrella and it's going to make you seem so much more considered when comparing you to the other couple hundred queries I might be reading. Second thing, most important thing, for fiction writers and also for memoir writers, make sure that you're telling a mini story of your story. This isn't a business letter. It's not a book report. Use every ounce of your storytelling skills to tell that mini story. And that means even on the word level, like picking words that have more story weight. I like to talk about the difference between find and discover. They can be interchangeable, but you find your car keys. Discover is something potentially story meaning, or decide versus vow, words like that. You can find these better storytelling words. And then the last thing is another place for you to stand out besides what's in your bio is I like to see what that intersection is between the person and the story they're writing. So it could be something kind of cheesy, like, like my character, unlike my character, if you're a fiction writer, whatever. But I like to see where that story comes from, that little spark. So all of those will probably make you rise to the top 20% of what I'm looking at if you can do those things. And then it's a matter of taste after that.
Good. Paige, did you have something?
Yeah, a lot of what everyone has said, of course, but I look at the high concept first. Is this concept something that just draws me in? And then I drop down to the pages and I look at the writing and if there's a great voice to it. That really is so key. But something since I've started using Query Manager that I want to mention is that I've discovered I can find out some of the other things that they're writing. You can check on the author, you can see whether they've been published before, all that great information that's included. And what I've discovered is, for me, it's career management. Some of my authors have written and published 60, 70 novels. I work with authors on a long-term career. And I really look at this holistically of not just trying to take on this one project, but take on and manage an author's career. And so when I'm looking at that author and I'm finding that they're actually writing all over the place, they don't just write a thriller or a rom-com or whatever, but they've written children's books. I want to see someone who has a direction, who kind of knows where they belong, who knows what they're writing. And so if I see that maybe just even in that query letter, they're not really sure where they fit in, that can influence my decision. So I just thought I'd bring.
And never pitch 2 books at one time.
Aha. Okay. That was my next question, that someone actually never put a second book into a query.
No, one at a time. It's enough. Let me wrap my head around one book at a time, at least for me. I think we all feel that way.
Yeah, it's confusing.
Okay. To maybe balance out the discouraging part of the conversation, are there instances, or how many instances, well, I don't know how you could quantify this, that you've actually found an author that you're representing in a cold query letter? I mean, is it that unusual?
No,
not at all.
Not at all.
no.
Okay, so the message is not easy. You have your hands full, we have our hands full, but keep trying and shape it based on the sort of advice that you've been giving us, because it does happen. Okay.
Absolutely.
I don't want to come across as negative, because I said to our group today, and they can tell you, I said, I'm doing this for a very long time. I said, but I like to work. I want to keep working, and I'm still looking for the needle in the haystack. I want another bestseller on my list. I mean, I just do. And that's the energy we all bring to this. We're all looking for another book and to make somebody's dream come true. That's the key things we love about our job. When you make somebody's dream come true, it is the most wonderful feeling.
Okay.
I think I can put it in perspective by saying that I've had maybe, I think it's 3 things that we found in queries that became major New York Times bestsellers, but over a period of how long? You're not going to find one every week. You're not going to find one every year.
Okay. Just to continue on this a little bit more, just sort of this sort of general topic of what we need to prepare to be able to persuade you to take on our work. Question, and this came up before, this question of comp titles. And now that the queries tracker has formularized how to do this, often a synopsis is requested. So you already have a query of 250, 300 words to read. Do you really want to read another 800-word synopsis? I mean, how does
I
that
actually
fit
could speak
in?
to that. I'm not a big synopsis person.
I'm
I
with Jennifer.
I like the sample. Sorry, what did you say, sir?
I'm with you. I don't like synopses
To
either.
your point, when you get the concept up front, and if you're intrigued by the concept, you go right to the pages.
I know.
It's always about like what the writing is. And
I just opened up and started using Query Manager is new for me. And so I said, add the synopsis. And in the past week, as I've been digging through, I'm realizing I'm not reading the synopsis because I'm reading the pages and I get the high concept. What you're looking for in the synopsis is if the story goes off the rails. And I did have this one time where I thought it was a story that was going to end up a certain way. And then when I looked at the synopsis, I realized in the last third, somehow the story ended up in outer space. Well, that is not
Mhm.
what I was expecting, right? So you look for things that will turn it down, that the author's vision isn't there. But for the most part, high concept, how's the writing? I want more.
Okay, and the other point that came up earlier was the idea of comp titles, and I know personally how hard it is just to find a book that sort of is like yours, but enough different that it's worth putting in. So writers spend a lot of time trying to figure out what's a reasonable comp title. Is it worth our time?
Absolutely.
What does it mean to you? What does the comp title mean to you, and how should it be presented so that it's meaningful and adds to the sell on our side or adds to the buy on your side?
A comp title, it represents the conundrum that authors are always in, which is that we want you, for the most part, to fit in with what's out there and what's selling. And yet we want you to be unique and bring something fresh and different to it. So that is your particular challenge. And the comp titles have to fall in that area to prove that this can sell and it will be successful because it already has. But we don't want too many because then that's been done a lot, so we don't want to do more of that. But to me, they have to be fairly recent in the last 5 years. And I don't want to see any that were self-published or published by some very obscure press. And I would very much like to know the numbers. How did the comp titles do?
I can read
They
you.
didn't do well. That's not much.
Yeah.
I can read you a thing that I requested, and this is why it appealed to me. I am currently seeking representation for my novel entitled Unsaid. Such and such will appeal to fans of Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine and Yellowface. I read in your agency bio that you are interested in representing more women's lit novels. I believe this book could be what you're looking for. Set in Sunshine, Florida, a newborn baby girl is abandoned in a Burger King bathroom, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is that it was that I happen to have loved Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine. So immediately seeing that, I thought, well, she's got that voice that already would appeal to me. And also she used another term here.
Yellowface?
But
Great story.
this is a mother of 4 adopted children, one of whom has autism. So
Okay.
I have a few tips I can. Oh, go ahead, Paige.
No, you go ahead, Sorcha.
A couple tips on comp books. One, I want to put everybody's mind at ease a little bit. I don't think any of us have turned something down because comps weren't good enough. We don't expect you to be great at them, but when you do them, it helps us. It also makes you look like a reader. So important. Oh my God, so important to us. If we take you on, we're undoubtedly going to try to find the best comps there are. The other 2 things is you, just like what Meredith read off, don't focus so much necessarily on plot. I hear of writers agonizing over whose plot is like mine, and it's more what author's fans would potentially be your fans. It'll appeal to readers of, and you can either put book title or author. And then the third tip is if you're really struggling on what to do, go to an indie bookstore or a library. Give them the really short 1-paragraph pitch of what you're working on, and you could ask, could you direct me to some books that sound like they might be comp books, and read them that way.
Right.
I also think there are 2 key things that we look for. One is very much voice, and the other is the ability to make you want to turn that page and want to keep turning the page.
Yeah.
All love a book that keeps us up at night. Everybody who's a reader loves a book that you don't want to put down, and or the voice that every time you come back to that book, that voice is still there. And you think about that voice even when you're not reading the book. I mean, this is that's what we really want.
Tall order, but okay. I'm going to move now from this idea of querying and reaching out to some questions that are more publishing related, because I think this would be germane to some of the people listening. So any advice for people? I'm going to combine 3 questions here. Any advice for people who have a short story collection that they are interested in selling? Are there any genres that are filling your in-basket these days? Or conversely, are there any genres where there might be gaps because they're not being filled by any other entertainment medium, but there might be a spot for it in books? So it's sort of getting into what people are writing. Room for short stories, what's going on if you're a genre writer, what's hot, what are you looking at, what interests you? That's the bundle. Anybody?
Well, I'm looking for female-driven stories about very empowered female protagonist. She's not waiting to be rescued. She's going to do it herself.
Mhm.
I'm looking, but this has been true of all storytelling of all time. I want some good plot twists. I want very strong characterization that jumps off the page at me. We always ask for 10 pages in the body of the email, and that's what gets looked at first. And as everyone else has said, from the very first word, that better grab us. That's the author's job.
Okay.
I can't really tell you how to do that because everybody's different.
I can jump in on, oh,
Sorry,
go ahead, Paige.
and you had
Sorcha had something to say. is what I-
something about short stories, I think.
Yeah, I do. Short stories are tough. I love them. I take them on every so often. It seems like every couple of years. So for those of you writing short stories, first of all, a third to a half of them should be published in journals and magazines that we already are reading, not the obscure ones. So we look for that, and they're almost always, although the books I've sold seem to have been an exception, there almost always should be a novel you're working on with it. Because if an editor or a house is going to take a chance on you, they want to know what's next. But in the shortcut for that is pick up Best American Short Stories, go right to the back, and there's the 100, their short list of 100 honorable mentions plus the ones that made it in of magazines that submitted, and boom, there's your starting submission list if you haven't yet. But I can't do anything with a collection where none of the stories have been published. And then I already forgot your other questions. I'm sorry again. I got stuck on short stories.
Well, the question was about, are there other genres that
Oh,
are
genres. Yeah.
or not, where you see an opportunity?
Well, I'll answer this in a slightly broader tone. I think because we're in such a contemplative time, I'm seeing a lot of queries that are all internal and agonizing and less external. And I really look for a balance of both. I don't do genre fiction, so I want that balance kind of half and half. There's the internal workings, but also something has to happen in the book. It can't be mostly internal or very, very small. And I think the other thing with every time we seem to be in a crisis, I hear from editors, we all do, that they're looking for kind of an uplift at the end. So it might not be the time for, everybody dies at the end sort of book. So what's the reader reward? Just think of that, rather than, doesn't have necessarily to be happy ending, but is there a reader reward? Because we're taking all of our emotions that are out there in the big world and we're burying it in a book, because wouldn't we rather be in this book? And then, like, do they have some place to go? Is there some sort of reward there?
Let me add about world building. One of this Rebecca Yarros, who's got multiple slots on the Times bestseller list. She's building a world, and a lot that is one of the keys. It seems now this genre called romantasy is really taking off, and now it's not the kind of thing I'm attracted to. I normally wouldn't read it, but if somebody comes in with a world building idea, I definitely will put. I'm now more interested in seeing that, because it seems to be what's grabbing people. And then if you look at the Times bestseller list, the books are there. 2 authors have about 7 slots on the list, and that's a very unusual thing. And it's because they've built a world that people want to go back to. So you might want to just check it out in terms of how, if your book has anything like that going for it, that could capture an agent's eyes, because that seems to be what people are, wanting to read. I mean, that's what the list tells you.
I mean, I'm seeing a tremendous amount of speculative material, all kinds of speculative material, from sci-fi to fantasy to romantasy to futuristic to, well, that's probably predominantly what I actually am receiving. My personal taste leads me to like a very grounded in reality character who anchors that. more than a lot of, other people. Again, that's my personal taste, and that's what I really look for, because I want to be drawn in by someone I'm relating to and the dilemmas. But Meredith, to your point of we were talking today about the Housemaid series, and an example of an author, who started 20 years ago, or maybe 15 years ago, and in her own life apparently is a neurologist. And her books clearly didn't catch on, but then she hit it with an upstairs, downstairs type of setting, which I think is perennial, and The Housemaid, and has built an entire franchise out of her backlist. And how that jumped on the bestseller list should be very hopeful for aspiring writers who feel for years they may be laboring in the dark. But magic can happen with that one that just actually, catches your attention, right? And gets that best-selling bump.
Paige,
yeah.
I think Paige has something to say. Paige. I think you're muted, Paige.
So into short story collections, I don't handle short story collections. I do handle genre. So of all the ones here, I'm probably most likely to get what's been really popular. So I am getting a lot of romantasy. I've read the romantasy. It's not something I'm necessarily looking. I think it's really saturated because it's been popular for about 3 years now. I think for the past 3 years, we've really been saturated with romantasy. But I just announced on Twitter, I think last week, at the beginning of this week, that where's the hole you had asked? I feel, to Sorcha's point, there's some sort of escapism. So I was even thinking some sort of dystopian survival, with the economy tanking. Everyone's looking for a simpler life, right? I mean, what can we do? It might feed, if you have something ready to go, now's a great time to show it to me, because I'd love to see it, because I feel like we're living in strange times, right?
Okay.
So taking advantage of what's happening right now, it's hard to determine whether that'll still be relevant 2 years from now when the book comes out. And that's the tricky thing. You can't really always time it. But in terms of capturing our interest, and you can see sometimes what we're looking for, we will announce it on social media. I will announce it on Twitter or Instagram or whatever Blue Sky, whatever it is that we're on. Hey, I'm open to this, or I'm hungry for this, or check out our manuscript wish list.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a whole website.
Right, it's a whole website. So there's a lot of things where we're hungry for at the moment. And it does change, because as soon as we announce it, we could get inundated with material. And as we're meeting with editors, for example, I handle rom-coms, and there was a while where all the editors said, oh, we're overbought on rom-coms. So I stopped really looking to take on rom-coms. And then 5 months later, I heard they were hungry again for it. I'm like, okay, you know what I mean? So even as agents, timing it can be tricky sometimes. But overall, I think we all do, but I know I in particular can they not just write to what might be popular or what there's a hole, but does this author have the legs to continue for a career? Can they pivot? What skills do they bring? And are they really paying attention to what's going on in the industry? And those are the sort of deeper things that we look for in our clients.
I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to ask a few specific questions that were sent to us in advance from people in the audience. Then I will go to the chat. There's a lot of questions in the chat. So these two questions, I'm sort of combining them because they have to do with this whole issue of sensitivity, authenticity of voice, that kind of question. So in the first instance, the person writes in, he's Jewish and white. Growing up, he had a friend who's Black, was adopted by a Jewish family that really did nothing to sort of help cultivate this child's Black identity. And growing up, they had a lot of conversations about this. Now, with his friend's permission, this white Jewish author has written this story, presumably from the point of view of this young man, young guy who is Black, Jewish, but his Black identity wasn't cultivated. Question is, as a Jewish white guy, can he write about a story about a Black child's growing up?
Of course he can.
He can.
Of course he can.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of question I'm not into this whole trend. I want to see good writing and I want to see good, responsible storytelling. The last book that I just read for pleasure was Memoirs of a Geisha, which is about a Japanese woman written by a white, I presume, Jewish man.
Mhm.
And it was brilliant and it was very popular when it was published, and it was published
In the
long
90s.
before any of this became an issue, and
Mhm.
nobody thought about it because it was such a good book.
I'm
That's
going to be,
all I care about.
that would be great, but I have experience where stuff has been turned down for the very reason you're mentioning.
Totally.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'm very frustrated.
I think we're in a different now we're in a different political moment. I think that publishing rules and you know what's been going on in the last couple of years around authenticity. Now we're in the Trump era, and that's one of the attacks, right? So now people are moving in the next direction. You know,
With American Dirt, that book, you know, was a
correct.
very good book, and she was totally, you know, because she wasn't, you know,
Crucified.
Right.
and I would not take that book on because I would have just that issue, you know. I mean, often when I see a male writing from a female point of view, they have to be very good at it, because it's really, you know.
But Meredith, can I intervene with discussion on American Dirt just for a second? Because I was at Macmillan when this was being published. I mean, the fact is, in the end, American Dirt was like a mega bestseller. So even though the publicity, which, you know, probably made that book really, really take off in its way, was so negative.
Fun book.
Pardon?
It was a good book.
It was a great book. And I think, I don't know who's read it here, but it's a very every woman character in a way. I mean, it really is. You read that, it could be anybody. But I think, Ken, are you really asking, there's the publishing industry of editors who are acquiring for their houses,
Mhm.
each of whom is going to be as different as we are, right? And we are ultimately, if we represent an author, trying to sell them to the best of our ability to the right house, the right match, the right individual. And that is part of our process, right? That we will introduce the writer we are advocating for to a variety of
Mhm.
people and hopefully find that right match. But I do think that the political winds change and dictate.
All right. This is a fascinating question. It could go on forever, but we can't, unfortunately. But to just draw a line on it, what I'm hearing is sort of there's an artistic answer, an idealistic answer, and there's a commercial problem. And that's where we're
Yes.
on.
Yeah.
Well
And so
put.
it's sort
And
of,
it's frustrating for us,
it's
right?
frustrating on
Yeah.
all sides.
Because we all believe it should be
Totally.
ideally anything.
Let me go on to the next specific question. And again, not quite the same sensitivity thing, but there's another question from an author. So this author has fictionalized real events that took place around World War II, and her protagonist is a woman doctor who has a special interest in like botanical medicines and homeopathy, and it's a mystery series. She uses that interest to solve mysteries. So back in the day when there weren't that many women who were in those professions, the question is that would be something then. Today, when the professions are somewhat more open to women, would a sort of how we got here story like this resonate? That's the question.
I mean, it depends on how it's done, but I know I went after a book about a female midwife that was a mystery series because I thought it was a great way for that individual to be able to be at all those different houses and to be solving crimes, right? So if the position of what they're in, and this is a mystery based on a true story, I think it based on the execution, it could be doable. It depends on how it's handled. And I think
Well,
that
the proof is in the reading.
Okay. And the writing.
the writing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, story
Okay.
first. Story first. If it's loosely veiled and you're calling it a novel, but that's really it feels like nonfiction, that's something different. So
Okay.
if it feels like a story and it happens to be true, great.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to move this quickly now because now we're getting close and I want to get to the chat. So two other questions that came in. This is fast. So this writer asks, would you consider a novel with an omniscient narrator? And would you consider novels of 265,000 words? So that's sort of a quick answer to that. What about the omniscient narrator part?
That's fine. That's fine.
That's fine.
That's fine.
Words are off, just too many words. Okay.
Too many words.
I don't want to get too philosophical about this, but it's a very interesting. This is sort of under the rubric of publishing today, and the question is AI.
Mm.
And so, just I guess I could ask a million questions about AI, but without getting
Same here.
too in the ether, have you encountered it? Is it something that is an everyday concern that authors need to be concerned about? That is a publishing concern when you go to the publishing houses.
Yeah, we've actually talked about this, and most of us have incorporated AI language in our agency agreements, and we're seeing AI language in the publishing agreements. So yes, it's of concern, and we have to be
What
upfront
is the A? But when you say AI language, it addresses AI, but what is its what is the inference there?
Well, how much has the author used AI to write that? How much, have they used it? Is it going to be caught? The publisher is going to have the author sign a contract that says they've not used AI.
Yeah.
You can use AI for editing. I mean, even Grammarly and it is in effect AI, but
Yeah.
not for intellectual property itself, because then who does it belong to?
I had one author use AI just to create the proposal because he was academic and wanted it to sound more commercial. And once he saw what AI did, he said, "Oh, I can do that." And then he did.
Okay. Okay.
It's going to take your jobs away if that was the other part of the fear. I don't think AI is going to get good enough to completely erase human imagination and writing talent. Hopefully not. I don't know. You guys are looking skeptical.
I'm going to start to go to the chat now, and we'll see where this takes us. And basically, it's very hard for me to sort of summarize this. Unfortunately, it's hard enough just to watch the chat. So what I'm going to do is I'll try to scan these and I'll read them. We'll see where they go. The first one I'm going to read because it's so relevant to what we just were speaking about. If the question is this a bad time for novels about AI or androids, given the current fears about the topic and its impact on the creative arts? So turning it around, is there an opportunity there to write something that's sort of a genre-ish, maybe sci-fi? I don't want to put a label on it.
Well,
Just the way the author wrote it.
Depends how it reads.
Clara and the Sun was that kind of a book. It was about robots in a whatever. So the answer is it's already been done. I think that book that sold very well. So the answer is yes. It's certainly, if it's done well, it can be done. It certainly can work.
Always in the writing, much more about, is this a bad topic? Is that a bad topic?
Right.
We are
Is it
seeing
just something?
Yeah,
What's that, Paige?
I said we are seeing a bunch come in, though. I mean, as it percolates into conversation, people are thinking it's a great idea and jumping on it. So I'm feeling like we're seeing a few more than we did maybe 3 years ago. But I mean, look at Terminator.
Okay.
I want to mention one other thing, and that's the gimmick.
Please.
And
Sorry.
I said I want to mention one other thing. That's what I call the gimmick.
The gimmick.
You look at a book like Lessons in Chemistry, where there's a talking dog. If you look at a book like Really Bright Creatures, where there's a talking octopus, I mean, these things where you're using where an animal or whatever, something unusual becomes a talking element and the voice is good, that can really work. So if you're using something creative like that and it's done well, it can be a lot of fun, and people really do like that kind of thing.
Magical realism is has been
realism.
And Meredith, you brought up yellow face, but I just want to say the rule in publishing was that books about publishing didn't work for so many years. That we said, oh, books about writers, books about publishing, and there you go, book about publishing, moral issues around everything inside our industry, like nothing else that I've read recently, and look how huge it became. So it was so great that everything defies a rule,
right,
if it's really well done.
Totally, I totally agree with that.
Okay, quick other question. I don't know if I call this a genre. I write literary autofiction. Do you see that as fiction when you discuss genre interests? So any response on writing autofiction, which I guess is fiction with a strong sense of coming from your own experience?
It has to work as a novel if you're writing fiction. I mean, that's
Yeah.
I keep going to that very basic.
Yeah.
Does it entertain? Does it not sag in the middle? does it seem to have a plot, not everything that happened to the author? So in some ways, we shouldn't even know that it should just work as a novel. And then your bio tells us a lot of this happened to me or something like that.
So much fiction is based on
Um,
people's experiences anyway, that what they draw and what they bring to it. So, you might have a story about a baker and the person is a professional baker. We see that a lot.
the next question, I'm going to get to the nut of this question. I'll just read the first sentence, which it says, do overplayed openings, meaning the work or not, meaning you wake up, you get ready for the day, you look out the window, blah, blah, blah. And I think the larger question there is when you're opening up a manuscript, especially if it's a literary manuscript, are you always looking for stakes? Does it always have to, does somebody always have to fall off the cliff within the first 10 pages? Is there time for, the pulling back the camera, that kind of an idea, the slower opening?
I'm actually going to jump in and say I feel like in the past 5 years, writing has changed and writing is organic, and you can see things that were written in the 90s feel very different than written now. And I
Right.
feel that slower opening is something that, although is not as common now. Editors always say they're looking for propulsive plot, and you
Right,
really
right,
have to
right.
capture their interests in the first, 10 pages. So there has to be something there.
It's all a matter of pacing. You can write about watching paint dry and make it interesting if you know how to tell it in a way that it moves us to the next sentence and then the sentence after that. That's called narrative drive, and that's something to cultivate.
I will say a thing
Very
that I do
interesting.
sometimes when I teach, though, is to say, look at there's the place you started as an author, and then there's the place where the story should really start. And a lot of times that where the
Yeah.
story should
Yeah.
start is further in. And so
Oh,
take your first 30 pages and go down.
yeah.
What if I start here? What if I start there? It doesn't mean there has to be a cliff and
Right.
somebody falling off it.
Right.
But if you're just starting with the quotidian and there's nothing new I'm learning from it, I'm not getting to page 5 because I have so many
Right.
others in the stack to look through.
Okay, that's really interesting. I thought that Irene, what you said about narrative drive also being propulsive, not necessarily that it's a car chase. You're
Right.
just working sentences to move the
Oh, in fact, that's
person
not even a good idea. That's too
Yeah.
obvious.
Yeah. Um,
Can I give you a quick example here
sure.
from a very politically incorrect book, but I just like this example. Scarlett O'Hara was not beautiful, but men seldom realized it when caught by her charms, as the Tarleton twins were. Does that make you want to read? Yeah, what is she doing? If she's not beautiful, but she's charming, what is she doing? It's just
Okay.
a little thing, but it makes you go on.
Okay, and this conversation leads actually nicely to the next. I'm looking for a segue here. This one actually works, which is, well, how much editing do you do? So you get something and it either is too propulsive or not propulsive enough, but you sort of like, if you have the feeling in your gut, there is something here. Do you do editing or do you?
I'm the heart of an editor here, so
Yeah,
I'm an editorial editor. I'm an editorial agent, and I have
yeah,
worked on every single novel that I
yeah.
have taken on to sell. Absolutely. And when I see promise, there's always work to be done in a novel. I think that publishing has changed, and we are much more of the gatekeepers. It was one of the things that when I left as an editor, I was getting more frustrated with the focus on marketing and promotion and the inability to do the original editing that I had loved so much. And I think we're probably all doing much, more of that. Rarely does something come in letter perfect. And I think if you read acknowledgments in books, you read thanking the people that the authors have worked with, you see that in some cases it's taken them years.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, Somewhat related to this, are there any tips for pitching plot-driven versus character-driven stories? So we've sort of done both sides here, sort of a literary narrative drive and plot and rising stakes. And this person is asking any tips specifically if you're pitching plot-driven.
It needs everything. So many times we'll see something that is brilliantly written, but it doesn't have much of a plot. Or it's got tremendous plot, but the writing isn't good.
Yeah.
It's got to have the whole package.
Okay.
I mean, for example, in the book Orbital, which I recently read, there's not a lot of plot in it, but it's so beautifully written, and it's such a picture of what it's like to be in outer space for a period of time. But it's not exactly like, you know, that they're going to be shot. It's not like Star Wars or anything like that. But it's so, when something's so beautifully written, you can slide a little on the plot because they've captured something in a beautiful way, and that can carry a book and make it work.
Kind of the opposite question though, isn't it? This is from somebody who's plot oriented, wanting to know what tips we have. Did I understand that
That's
right?
what the person is asking. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think you have to focus on what you believe your heart of your material is. And if
Mhm.
it's a character-driven mystery series, focusing on the character makes sense from the original pitch. If it's a standalone novel and it's an original plot, but it's being compared to XYZ, then perhaps, then that's the focus that you bring to it. But it has to do with, I think, what the author feels is his or her special sauce.
Okay. And many of the questions in the chat, and just in general, I think, are very specific to the person who's asking the question. This is a very good opportunity to hear firsthand from you folks. And this is sort of in that genre, so to speak. I'm going to read it exactly as it's written. What are your thoughts about a memoir told in an unconventional way, such as in glimpses or short vignettes? Is this something that might be interesting, or do you look for a more straightforward kind of writing, kind of approach?
So many of these questions I can give the same answer to.
I know it. Yeah.
The first really good mentor that I had in publishing had a slogan that I've used all my life, which is the proof is in the reading. I don't know if that's going to work. Let me look at it and see if it's working.
Yeah.
I will note that it's often more difficult to try something new and different, because who we're selling to, they're often afraid to take a chance, right? So we're always mindful of, we have to convince the editor if it's something they're going to take to sales and marketing. How do I sell this? What is it similar to? Going back to comps, it goes back to, and if you're trying to break the mold, that's a little more challenging. So
Okay.
you have to really
Sounds
believe-
like it's a perfect opportunity to do short pieces as well. Try to get short pieces of it published. If they're writing in glimpses or vignettes, that's perfect. And you're sort of proving audience a bit that way if you get them published in big enough magazines or journals.
And the next question sort of picks up on that, which is what publications, magazines, journals are you reading to find new authors? So what are there specific places that people should submit to, basically, because you're looking at them?
So for especially for memoir, or even some autofiction, if you want to call it that, I read religiously the Modern Love columns because it's such a great exercise in limited word count. You have to do that. So I challenge people all the time, write a Modern Love column. You're almost certainly going to be rejected. And at the end of it, you have a tidy little essay that you can send out to other places. But my other tip is just go Best American Short Stories, Best American Essays. You're going to find in that index all the places that we're going.
I read a lot of the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, a lot of the op-ed pages for memoir.
Oh, yeah.
Since we're talking about specifically memoir, and I've gotten a number, especially doctors, I represent a number of doctors who've written memoirs, and I've gotten a lot of very interesting material of all kinds from those pages. Also because, you're hearing from some celebrated figures and some not celebrated figures. So it's a good mix. I like opinion pages.
Next question. Irene mentioned that historical novels are hard to sell, if you remember saying that. And why is that? And is it because there are many, or where are they being published instead? Or are they being published?
Funny you said that, because I was thinking to myself, if I saw a new version of, say, The Clan of the Cave Bear, even though I know that these things are hard to sell, well, of course, that's a world building thing, but part of the problem is that it really has to either represent the period that it's focusing on in such a just delightfully quirky or unusually interesting way, then I think it can work. And or if you're doing something, that's older or whatever, and you've got, a different kind of characters or whatever, something fresh, so I would not be ruling out a historical novel at all with the right combination of elements that I can make it sound fresh and real. And I think there's going to be a comeback. I suspect that somebody's going to do something and then there'll be a trend toward that again, because it hasn't been around for a while now. So these things always kind of, when it hasn't been around for a while, somebody breaks through.
Look at 1906 and 1923, and TV is certainly historical at the moment.
Yeah, well, historical now means, to me, the general rule is 100 years ago, and now that we're in 2025, it means something said in the 1920s is now historical. So that opens up more territory all the time. But I think the answer to the question is all the good stuff got done, and now we need to have a resting period, and it will come back.
Okay.
I don't know how many books I sold about Henry VIII and his wives and his mistresses and this and that, but after a while you run out.
Okay, well, then the next question has to do with literary novels. And the supposition is, or the question is, are literary novels sort of dead in America? Is Europe a better market for literary novels? And I guess I would even expand that. If you take on a manuscript, how are you thinking about the market? English speaking market, any place plus translation, or are you thinking America primarily?
I'll jump in on that one. I mean, the US is the biggest market, so
Yeah.
I would be pretty hesitant to take on something that I think wouldn't work for the US market and might only work overseas. We start here. I mean, that's just where our 15% has to come from somewhere. And so we start here. And I always resent those questions. Sorry,
Go
person
ahead.
who asked it, but like, is such and such dead? Because I mean, no, nothing's really dead. Can it get oversaturated? Is it not selling in as numbers like Romantasy? Sure, that's going to come and go. But I think you control, for a writer, just control what you can control, which is writing the best damn thing you can. And if now is not that time for it, you write the next thing, and maybe in a couple of years that thing you first wrote does find its place. But anyway, I don't think it's dead. I just think it's as hard as it's ever been. That's all.
Okay.
I got something in that I thought was really good for, say, the UK. I would send it to Heather, my foreign rights associate, and leave that in her court.
Okay. This is from the chat. Just thinking, obviously, one of the reasons you all got into this business, not just because part of it is because you want to help people and get pleasure from building careers, but you also love to read, I presume. So does your job leave you time to read for pleasure, since we're all sending you so much stuff? And if it does, what are you reading now, particularly fiction?
I'll take that.
Okay, Jennifer.
I mean, I really rely on vacations, to be honest, for my personal reading. It's hard to be without a book in my hand. I mean, that is why I got into publishing. So I always have a couple things, something on the reader, something on an iPad, something a little on audio, and a print book, just in case I'm also traveling and can't get, always have to have something. I was talking today, I just read Broken Country, which is something that I really liked, which, you could argue, I mean, that was a selection of, I think it's Reese. I haven't looked, Reese or Jenna's book club, kind of a spare romantic triangle told in upmarket, more literary prose, I would say. So a nice kind of combination of what I love the best. But yes, it's difficult to read in our daily job for me. However, I think it's essential because I always need the comparison to make me feel that I am going after the right thing and my taste is on the right track. And since I'm pursuing, a commercial success, which is the business, then let's see what they are and what the range is.
We were talking about this today during our meeting.
Mhm,
It
mhm.
depends. We're at different places in our lives, right? I think Jen and I have kids, and it's very, very busy, so I don't get as much reading time as I like. But just today, Land of Milk and Honey arrived in my at my house because I'd ordered it. I have a to be read pile that if it falls over will kill me next to my bed. But through osmosis, I'm hoping that I can read it, but I don't always. So this to be read pile can be a year old that I haven't taken I keep buying the books, but I'm not reading the books.
Yeah, yeah.
And that
That's
is
what happens to me.
And
um,
I'm a huge reader, and I always have one book on my Kindle and one book on Audible, and I'm a very big reader. On the other hand, I don't have children, I'm not married, so maybe I have a little more time, and I understand completely that that does free me up a little bit more. Although I do
jealous, Meredith.
pretty active social life, but I still it's just something about I have to have those two things going, now that I got one of my agent friends got me into Audible, and now I'm like totally hooked on Audible as well. And it's fun when you're waiting online in the grocery store, you're reading your book, or if you're in my kitchen at night when I'm making dinner, I'm listening to something else. It's kind of like that.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'll just add that if we don't read, our benchmark slips. It's part of what Jennifer was saying.
Oh,
that-
that's interesting. Yeah. So it's
Yeah,
really
because
very much
the,
so.
it's
the
part of
ba-
your
because
work.
the best in a pile that we're reading
Yeah.
might look pretty good, but if we haven't read the stuff that's out there, plus
Yeah.
agents also need to read in the genre they're selling.
Yeah.
Like what were the books that we didn't wrap but got a big fuss over,
Right.
because we just need to know. So yeah, we're always reading.
I've just decided, I said to announce to the group today, I'm going to read Rebecca Yarros and/or Freida McFadden. I'm going to read The Housemaid because I normally would never pick it up, but I got to see why everybody's reading that.
So really what you're saying is something that applies to writers as well. I mean, we're
heck
both in
yeah,
the same
yeah.
business in the sense we both really need to know
Absolutely.
what's out there now.
But a lot of writers have told me they don't like to read when they're writing their book because they don't want somebody else's voice in their head. So I do understand that as well.
Read a different genre then, I would say, because
Yeah, yeah.
you still have to read good
Yeah,
writing. You
that's-
absolutely have to read good writing.
Well,
Yeah.
one of the things I ask during a conference is, what other books have you read in this area that you're writing? And if they stumble and they haven't read, that's a sign to me that maybe they're not writing in the right genre for them.
Absolutely.
We're getting close to, believe it or not, closing time here. So I thought maybe what we could do in the last couple of minutes is just sort of open this up. Each of you have the floor. You make your pitch, whatever you want to call it. I mean, what do you want to say to the writers who are listening in about what you offer, what you'd like to see, and if each person took a minute or two, we could sort of wind it down that way. Paige, why don't you start?
So I have a background in television as well as editorial. So I like a lot of these high concept things. And as you've heard, I'm looking for a long-term relationship with authors, not just one book wonders. So when you're sending something in to me, make sure that I'm very familiar with kind of the path you see yourself as an author. That can change, but I think that's very important. I run a company that has other agencies under it, so we really try and be full service. So if there is a pivot, I could always pass it on to a colleague in my office that happens to handle that, or even my lovely colleagues here. So I think if you send anything to us, we're collegial enough that we're willing to share. And I think for all of us, we are passionate about what we do. Otherwise, we wouldn't be up till 9 o'clock at night, you know, trying to partner with someone to bring their book to light and to make their dreams come true. So, yeah,
Okay.
that's it for me.
Zorka?
Okay. My couple things. One, I would say that if I were you, I would look at what we do on all the individual websites. But if you're on the fence, I would say just query anyway, because anyone can do that at any time. And the fact that you are Columbia grads or in the process of getting your MFA, I mean, you're going to be better than a lot of what we see. So the worst you're going to get is a no response or a no. Put Foundry or Columbia, whatever the tagline is, put that in the subject line so you don't get lost. So there's the details. And then as far as what I'm really hoping to find, I love books with a strong sense of place, novels with a strong sense of place and voicey. And I like, even though this kills me sometimes trying to sell them, I really like observational novels. Like they need to still have a plot, but when something like a Julia Phillips kind of like narrow it down and let me see this world you're in really fine tune, not broad brushes. I want it to come alive for me. So I'm a real sucker for place and for voice.
Great. Jennifer?
Yeah, so I'm the what's at stake person. I really like that, and whatever it is up front. I watch, unfortunately, too much TV. I watch a lot of TV series. And right now I'm watching Paradise and I watch Zero Day and some things that maybe are a little far afield from me, and I'm always interested in the plotting of a series because if you condensed it to one book and then you spread it out, what is the formula that keeps me going? And as someone said before, turning the pages. There was a book I edited at St. Martin's that I bought and I read, and I basically sat down in the morning and I got up in the afternoon, and it was called Baby Teeth. And it was about a mother who had a bad seed child, about the relationship between the two and the family and the interdynamics and the psychology behind it. Very interested in the psychology of characters. And when I got up at the end of the day, I said, I have to buy this book. And that's what I'm really looking for in whatever the genre is, right? Whatever it is, I want to lose myself. I want somebody who carries me away, that other side of, what you would say escapist. And it's so hard to characterize, but it's not limited by any particular thing. It's got that reality grounding it that makes me believe it and buy into it. And the likability of the character doesn't have to be likable, but they have to be fascinating. So that's kind of
Thank you. Irene?
Well, I'm always looking for something that's high concept and good high quality. I love things that fit the sweet spot between commercial and literary. I want it to be very well done, and I also want it to be very readable. And one thing that I especially love is anything that's cross-cultural, like two cultures confronting each other, like Shogun. Like that, where neither side is right or wrong. It's just fascinating to watch them confront each other. And I'm also looking for somebody I can build. I've had a lot of experience and a lot of success building careers. I don't want a one-off. I want something, and I want an author who understands that it's a process that, as I think it was Jen mentioned before, it could take 20 years and then all of a sudden you're on a bestseller list. So you're a 20-year overnight success, but it does happen all the time. And I want to be there when it does.
Great. I think everybody wants to be there with you. Meredith, do you want to comment maybe on what you want and maybe talk a little bit more about agents?
I like it. First of all, I want to thank everybody for attending. I mean, we really love that you want to hear what we do, and we really are here to help you. And I hope you'll query all of us because, I think I'm sure you're a very interesting group. I personally love, for me also, it's a lot about voice. It's a lot about making me want to turn the page. I love humor. I like something wry. I like psychological twists. I like something that makes me think about something in a different way. And if you can do that and you can make me turn the page, I'm your agent and I will help you. I will build your career. So we're all here to build careers. We really, as you said, it's not, it's, unless you've written Gone with the Wind, then I'll let you off the hook. But without that, I think we've all had a pleasure, talking to you tonight or sharing what we have to share. And we hope you'll reach out to us and let us help you in any way we can.
Thank you. And thank you, Meredith and Paige and Irene and Jennifer and Sorche. I hope that you folks listening in have enjoyed this and gotten as much out of it as I have. I really appreciate the exchange and how, well, Meredith, you said you'd be frank, and it was frank, but it was a lot of fun too. And I think it's good to sort of humanize the process a little bit because you're looking at 400 manuscripts, we're looking at 400 rejections. So this sort of forms a little bridge, which is not a bad thing these days. So I thank everyone in the audience who's joined us. I would like to, I suppose, make my one last pitch for Columbia Fiction Foundry. So if you enjoyed and benefited from what you heard tonight, please go on our website. As I said, we do workshops and other programs like this, and we'd love to have you join us. So I hope I see some of you at another one of our workshops soon. And meanwhile, I would say good luck with your writing and good luck to our friends, our agent friends, with your reading, and hope that you find in tonight's haystack some needles or some gems. And with that, I'll say good night. Be well. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.